Have you ever stopped to think about how we got, well, here? Our entire modern world? It didn't just appear. For almost all of human history, life was pretty much the same. Rural, agricultural, and slow. And then, bam. In what amounts to a historical blink of an eye, everything changed. Today, we're going to dive into the fire and steel that forged our world, the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. We're talking about an event that historians put on the same level as agriculture. Humanity learning how to farm. That is an insane comparison to make, but that's the monumental scale we're dealing with. A total, complete transformation of how we live, how we work, even how we think. It absolutely set the stage for everything that came next. But, and this is the big question we're going to tackle, what was the real price of all that progress? Because let's be honest, this incredible leap forward, it was messy. It was a story of genius and innovation for sure. But it was also a story of unbelievable human suffering and a scar we left on the planet that's still here today. It was this huge, complicated, and yeah, often brutal trade-off. All right, so first, let's look at the marvels, the incredible engine of progress. How did this all even happen? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was like a domino effect, a cascade of new ideas and tech, each one building on the last. And together, they unleashed a wave of production the world had literally never seen before. So it all really kicks off with power, the steam engine, right? Perfected back in the 1760s, this thing was the beating heart of the revolution. Suddenly, you could power massive factories. That leads to inventions like the cotton gin, and the textile industry just explodes. But then you think, what if we put that steam power on wheels? Boom! The steam train. The world starts to shrink. You see how it works? Every invention wasn't just an addition, it created this feedback loop that just screamed for the next big thing. And what fueled all those steam engines? Coal. Mountains of it. This number right here, 1,100%. That is the absolutely bonkers increase in British coal production in just 100 years. We're talking going from about 5.2 million tons in 1750 to a staggering 62.5 million tons by 1850. That's the raw, dirty energy that was being shoveled into the furnace of progress. And what did all that energy and innovation do? Well, it changed economics forever. For the first time in human history, you could have sustained growth. See, before this, humanity was kind of stuck. Anytime you made more food, the population would just grow and eat it all up, and everyone would stay pretty much at the same level of poor. The revolution just shattered that cycle. It created a world where economic growth wasn't just a lucky break, it was the new normal. And the results, they were totally transformative. All of a sudden, regular people could afford things like decent clothes or actual furniture. And a whole new social class just pops into existence, the middle class. The managers, the doctors, the merchants. They weren't super rich aristocrats, but they weren't dirt poor laborers either. Cities were booming, and yeah, we're definitely going to get to the dark side of that in a minute, but they also offered jobs and a shot at a different life, something you just couldn't find out on the farm. Okay, so that's the story of progress, but it's only half the story. Because for every rich factory owner, there were thousands of people paying the price with their lives. The poet William Blake had a name for these new factories. He called them dark satanic mills. And honestly, that phrase just perfectly captures the brutal, soul-crushing reality for the millions who worked in them. Just look at this. This gives you a small idea of what it was like. People poured into the cities from the countryside looking for work, and they got crammed into these filthy, overcrowded slums. No running water, no sanitation. I mean, in a major city like Manchester, you could have 30 families sharing one single outdoor toilet. Rivers basically became open sewers. Is it any wonder that diseases like cholera and typhoid just ripped through these places? And if you thought living conditions were bad, life inside the factory was a nightmare. Just look at this breakdown. We're talking 12, sometimes 16-hour days, 6 days a week. Forget weekends, forget vacation. And the pay, a man might pull in about $8. A woman doing the exact same job, $4. A child, $2. It was just an endless, exhausting, and incredibly dangerous cycle. And this is probably the hardest part to even talk about. The children. We're talking kids as young as 5 years old working in these places. Their small size was seen as an advantage. In textile mills, they'd send them to crawl under the heavy machinery while it was still running. A lot of them were maimed or killed. And in the coal mines, like you see here, They would literally chain them to carts to drag coal through these tiny, dark tunnels. So you take the slums, the long hours, the dangerous work. What does that all add up to? This number, 17. In an industrial powerhouse like Manchester, the average life expectancy for a laborer was just 17 years old. Let that sink in. It wasn't a life. It was a death sentence. This new world of progress was literally being built on the bodies of the poor. So the human cost was obvious, right? It was immediate and brutal. But there was another kind of damage being done. Something slower, quieter, but maybe even more permanent. The revolution didn't just change human society. It started to change the entire planet. Think about this. The pollution was so bad and so new that they had to invent a word for it. That's where we get the word smog, smoke and fog. It became the signature feature of cities like London. All that coal being burned day and night just filled the air with this thick, toxic soup of soot and chemicals. And this is where the story from 200 years ago becomes our story, right now. This chart shows CO2 in the atmosphere. For centuries, it was stable, right around 275 parts per million. Look where we are today, over 415. That huge spike, the one that defines our modern climate crisis, its fuse was lit right here, with the very first coal-powered factories. And it wasn't just CO2, not by a long shot. The air was full of this nasty industrial cocktail. You had sulfur dioxide from burning coal causing acid rain. You had all that soot and smoke, particulate matter causing horrible lung diseases. And then the new chemical plants, they just dumped whatever they wanted, dyes, chlorine, you name it, straight into the rivers, poisoning the water and just wiping out entire ecosystems. If you want a picture of just how bad it got, listen to this. In London, in the summer of 1858, the River Thames, which was being used as an open sewer for millions, got so disgusting it was known as the Great Stink. The smell was so powerful, so unbelievably foul, that Parliament actually had to shut down because the politicians couldn't stand it. That's the level of pollution we're talking about. So how do you square that circle? You've got these two things happening at once. On one hand, you have incredible, world-changing progress, and on the other, just devastating costs. How do we even begin to make sense of this legacy, of a modern world that was truly forged in fire? This really lays it all out, doesn't it? The great trade-off. In one column, you have the foundations of our world, modern tech, cheap goods, the rise of the middle class, and eventually a better standard of living for many. But in the other column, that's the bill. That's the devastating price that was paid, crushing inequality, horrifying labor practices, and yeah, the very start of our climate crisis. The thing is, you can't have one without the other. They are completely, totally intertwined. And here's a really crucial point. This revolution never actually stopped. It just went global. The same patterns, both the good and the bad, that started in Britain, they just spread everywhere. The industrialization we saw in the 20th century, even our so-called information age, it's all part of the same story. The deep divisions we see in the world today between rich and poor nations, so much of that has its roots right here. And so, we end up right back where we started, with a big question. The legacy of the Industrial Revolution isn't just something you read about in a history book. It's not in a museum. It's the air we're breathing right now. It's the phone in your hand. It's the world economy. We've inherited all of it, the amazing gifts and the terrible costs. So the real question for us today is, what do we do with that inheritance?